Welcome to the Software Lifecycle Stories podcast. We bring you stories of what worked and sometimes what did not in the course of discovering, designing, developing, delivering, and using software-based solutions, as shared by practitioners who went through these situations. I'm very happy to share my conversation with Suresh Ramaswamy, a successful serial entrepreneur who started with roles in IT and then pivoted to helping others discover themselves as a transformational teacher. When I started this conversation, I was expecting a highly technical discussion with a VLSI architect, but what we ended up talking about was something literally mind-blowing. At PM Power, we've always combined the hard and soft aspects, including mindful approaches, for deriving the maximum impact from the journeys of delivery excellence. This conversation touches upon some of the mindfulness aspects that can make an entrepreneur or an individual contributor successful. In this conversation, Suresh shares his perspectives on personal development and transformation, letting go to learn to manage stress, etc., the need to be inclusive, managing and balancing personal and professional relationships, and what we talk about as the work-life balance. Is it really so? And he also shares a peek into his latest book called Just Be. Just Be, living life under an infinite guidance and moving through life. Listen on. Welcome, Suresh. Thank you for sparing the time to talk to our listeners. As we normally start, we would prefer the guest to introduce oneself, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this podcast. Really delighted to be here in Bangalore, and as well as meeting people who are truly interested in something deeper than the usual. And so, absolutely looking forward to this conversation. My background, I would summarize it as I'm very much of a transformational teacher, meaning helping people transform their lives, helping people discover deeper truths in the context of life as they are living it. Whether that focus currently happens to be on career or relationships or health issues, because all of these supposedly or apparently different areas are all actually trying to take us towards the same thing, which is deeper transformation. So I look at myself as helping them connect the dots and discovering the higher potentials available to them through these life experiences. So along those lines, recently I've written a book titled Just Be, and we could talk later about that. And that actually goes into many aspects of what I just mentioned. In terms of my background, I would say a good chunk of my career was in technology, because technology to me is, even now, absolutely fascinating. Not just software, but really technology, including hardware, software, and all the possible uses of these incredible creations of mankind. So I did spend quite a few years in software design and development, VLSI or microelectronics design, computer-aided design tools for IC and chip design. Then later on, I worked with business software. At the time, the term commonly used was client server, because it was moving towards distributed computing from centralized computing. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, client server, and then there's databases and servers and middleware, you might remember that term, and heterogeneous systems. And this distributed computing led to suddenly issues like I have 25 different sources of data and which speak different protocols and different APIs. How do I bring it all together and make an application that's meaningful? And of course, that led to human interface design, which also I found very, very interesting. So for a while, I was an architect and looking at these kinds of problems, and which led to ultimately me starting my own software company addressing one issue which I felt was significantly not addressed, which is how to do business process automation in a way that does not require investing in a huge computing infrastructure. And so that's what I started building, and one thing led to another, and the technology became part of a larger software company. And eventually that led to me focusing increasingly on personal growth and transformation, not so much focused on myself, but taking all the things I had learned and developed along the way and starting to share it with the world at large.
Wonderful. A couple of thoughts that crossed my mind as you were explaining was, one, this whole idea of helping people transform. I am associated with some of the startups or the early stage. People are thinking about starting up. And in Bangalore, you find that there are a lot of professionals with maybe a few years experience who feel very stressed at work. And then they say, I want to do something that makes a difference. Yeah. I want to go change the world, transform the world. But then when they start, they probably are under greater stress because they don't know the game. Everybody thinks that by writing an app, they'll become a unicorn in 6 months. Okay? Right. Which doesn't happen. So as a technology professional who has also accomplished a lot in terms of your own transformation and helping others transform, would you have some thoughts for them or advice for them? When you feel frustrated in your work, what do you do?
Yeah, great question. So that touches on various areas, including entrepreneurship and what to expect as an entrepreneur and how to be successful as an entrepreneur. And I think one of the keys that you're asking is how to also transform yourself and the world through the entrepreneurship. Yeah. So yes, it's a big question. Let me touch on a few things that just come to mind. First of all, I think entrepreneurship, doing your own startup, absolutely incredible. I would encourage everybody to certainly consider that possibility as a way of not only escaping what feels like a frustrating corporate environment, but really, instead of that, as stepping up to a higher, you could say, measure or scale or standard, where you are not doing this to take it easy and quickly retire, but really looking at it as more strategically, I would say, so that beyond the immediate app or beyond the immediate idea which you just hope is going to turn into something. And it's fine to have those, dreams, but at the same time, we don't want to get so short-sighted with the dream that we are missing out on some of the other important areas that are available for unfoldment. Mm-hmm. So, first, let's touch on, I would say, uncertainty and risk is probably the first topic that comes to mind, where if you have not done a startup before, you will be surprised the level of uncertainty you're dealing with. Everything is unknown and uncertain. It's not just you and your little app, mm-hmm. but how are you going to collect how are you going to distribute it? How are you going to collect revenue? How are you going to track things? There's literally any number of details which can immediately bog you down. Mm-hmm. And while all these things seem scary, I think fundamentally what I would like everybody to understand is you learn to operate in that environment of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. It is a different mindset. It is not the usual, I am a successful person and I am going to achieve highly. This mindset is not appropriate. It's really, how do I thrive in uncertainty and moving towards success, but not fixating on success as the sole criteria for the best outcome of what I'm doing. Yeah. Very different mindset. So this uncertainty, actually, as you learn to operate in it for your startup, turns out that is very important for your personal growth and transformation. Because true transformation does not unfold according to some plan that you have created for the next 18 months. Mm-hmm. it has its own twists and turns, and there are some things you know and a lot of things you don't know. So it is dealing with uncertainty and navigating uncertainty is very important in your own internal growth. So this is one aspect which is, as you get comfortable with it, you realize very few people are actually living that way, because most people are risk averse. They're scared of risk. They want security, predictability, comfort, convenience. In fact, they would like guarantees. Okay, can you just guarantee I'm willing to do a startup, but can you guarantee it will be successful? That is a ridiculous question. Of course, you cannot guarantee it. If you are looking for guarantees, don't get into the startup business, right? So this way of stepping away from predictability, because even in corporate environments, there is a lot of pressure to have predictable performance. Everybody wants quarterly revenues to be predicted to the last paisa. They want it. If off by a few paisa, oh, what is going on? This results unnecessarily in squashing a lot of potential that is there. This is true whether it's a startup or a Fortune 500. We don't want to get over fixated with predictability. So in terms of looking at how can I incorporate some elements of personal transformation into my startup, certainly we set the uncertainty mindset, but also whatever your original idea and offering is, whether it's delivering pizzas faster or printing on demand or whatever the idea is, I would suggest look at what are the broader impacts of that beyond rapid revenue growth and the usual success story, and look at how you can meaningfully help the world transform through your offering. And this is actually, it requires a very conscious effort, and more than effort, I would say it requires a conscious intention. Most entrepreneurs might be tempted to focus their intention on financial outcomes. And I would strongly suggest that keep your core intention to be of value, to help others reach, in your own words, whether it's higher states of consciousness or higher quality of life or transformation at deeper levels. Keep that as the core objective. And absolutely, you can have your financial objectives too, but that should always be subservient to the core objective of having impact, because that ultimately will cause you and your offering to blossom into something you cannot even conceive of right now.
Right. So in doing this, this is all about, let's say, the startup part. But as an individual, what is a transformation that one probably has to be prepared for, probably not transform before you jump in, while running in the rat race, or probably everyone considers it that way. Maybe this is something that is going to give me a very vacation type of a lifestyle.
Right. What sort of transformation should one be prepared for, right, as you embark on this journey of entrepreneurial type of pursuit? I think you will find that it is more transformational than you had bargained for, because those of the listeners who might have perhaps heard of consciously pursued some sort of spiritual growth through, whether it's yoga or meditation or vipassana or zen or whatever path you pursued, and said, I'm looking for some spiritual growth, I'm going to study the scriptures and hang out with beautiful, wonderful teachers. We may have seen that as spiritual pursuit. I'm going to tell you that if you go deep in a startup, it's a very spiritual growth journey. How is that? Let me tell you one key point. So normally we think of spirituality requires us to renounce and let go of various things, and we normally think, oh, this is like a sannyasi kind of person, they've renounced everything, they're wearing saffron robes. That is sannyasi. I'm a regular person. Actually, spiritual growth requires, it's much harder than just changing clothes. It is true inner renunciation, right? And renunciation has nothing to do with ashrams. Renunciation has to do with inner letting go of anything less than the ultimate. Okay, we're not just talking a nice shoe or a nice watch or a nice car. Oh, okay, I'm going to let this go. It is anything that is ultimately superficial as compared to the ultimate truth. So this letting go-ness, okay, this renunciation, you will find that when you start working and have your own company, every single day you will be challenged with some preconceived thought you had, whether it is how a product should look like, or how it should be designed, or how a customer should interact with it, or how partners in a company should behave, or anything that you think you know it, you will find that these beliefs, concepts, preconceptions, attitudes are all challenged. And what happens when it is challenged? You have two choices. You can decide, I am already right, I am going to stick to my point of view, I am going to defend it, I am going to argue, I am going to fight to defend myself. Or you can say, let me step back for a second. Yes, I had that point of view. Let it go for just 5 minutes and consider other possibilities. Perhaps some of them are better possibilities. And perhaps some of them are suggestions coming from partners, customers, stakeholders, suppliers, wherever it is today happens to be, it's coming from somewhere. And am I willing to let go of my preconceived idea of some kind? You will find that this is very much core to renunciation. Letting go of any sort of presupposition, preconditioned belief. And if you really think about it, a lot of our things, even the things we think I have worked in software for 100,000 years, you think you know it. Well, don't always assume you know it just because you did it for 25 years. There's always something different at any given point in time. So this constant letting go-ness of what you thought versus what is currently facing you, and being able to be flexible, adaptable, let's even use the word agile, for some of you agile has some meanings, is going to be critical. And that actually is very important for your own personal growth, spiritual growth, transformation. It is one of the most critical elements. I also mentioned uncertainty earlier.
Right.
This is a critical element where if you are rapidly letting go of anything and everything in favor of something bigger, the bigger starts taking over. And in other words, you become bigger. And this is really very much at the heart of spiritual growth. And so you will find, if you keep doing that, in a few years of your software company or any other type of company, that you are at a completely different place internally at the end of that few years. So that is, I would say, one thing, if you are keeping that in mind up front, because Shivguru, you were asking about that, how can I upfront, what can I do, what mindset can I have? This is, if you go there prepared, you will have less of a struggle. Because struggle and conflict, and nobody likes that. But if you willingly let it go, you will find it is much more exciting, challenging, and fun. See, the very different words. When you are in that mode of being flexible, dynamic, adapting, ready for change, willing to let go, you will find the interaction with partners, interaction with customers, interaction with employees, interaction with stakeholders of all kinds, much more exciting, joyful, and exploration. Just like, why do you decide to go on a trek to, Kedarnath, Rishikesh? Why? Because you cannot predict every little detail, but you have decided you are going to enjoy all those twists and turns. That attitude, if you take, there will be twists and turns, and I'm not going to fight them, I'm going to enjoy them. And the key to enjoyment is letting go.
Sounds simple, but I guess it'll take time to sink in and actually internalize it. But then my mind can't wait. There are a lot of questions. Trying to combine two things that you said, that you also help people transform the aspect of relationships also. Now, when one starts to let go and then aims for a higher purpose, while you spoke about how it can expand oneself in the enterprise context or a startup context, how does it affect the personal relationships?
Okay, yeah, great question. Because relationships...
Is letting go something that you can do outside of work also?
Yes, absolutely. So, turns out this letting go-ness actually has got big implications for our relationships, both personal and professional. Very big implications. And we might actually have a tendency to look at personal relationships very differently than we might look at professional relationships. The fact of the matter is, we tend to look at it like that because we partition things into work life and personal life or life outside work, and we're always looking at it mostly from a time and resource perspective, chopping off hours and looking at it that way. But if you look at it from a little deeper level, we are constantly in relationship with what is around us, whether it is animate object, inanimate object, a person who happens to be a co-worker right now because you happen to be sitting in an office. You step out for a walk, it could be a stranger you see outside in the park. And you step at home, it could be a family member. But truly, from a consciousness perspective, there is a field of consciousness, and within that field of consciousness, there are things moving through it which appear to be something other than myself. And then you relate to these things. These people. So, in a sense, all of these relationships, you could say, are sort of in the same broad category of something I perceive within my field of consciousness that clearly is there, and what does it mean, how do I want to relate to it, etc. Now, when you look at letting go, what happens with any relationship is, relationships are absolutely incredible tool for growth. Whether you are looking for growth or not looking for growth. So the only thing is, if you're not looking for growth, relationships can be frustrating because they are constantly trying to push us towards higher states of consciousness, more awareness, more expansion. And if we resist that, what do? We feel the relationship is difficult. Okay. So we tend to then say, I would rather have easier relationships because, I have enough stress in my life. I don't need more difficult relationships. But unfortunately, we don't look at it as the difficult ones are trying to show us something that perhaps we don't want to see. And what is it is challenging us? Some belief we do not want to let go. Okay, so that comes back to letting go. So let's say you go for a startup and you are wise and you are ready to let go and you keep letting go and your startup actually unfolds beautifully. Then let's say that letting go-ness that develop, the capability you have developed, guess what? You go back to your family, you go back to your friends, that letting go-ness is there inside you. You will find your friendships are so much deeper. And your family relationships, even good ones, are not just good, they are extremely good because you are able to go so much more to an authentic place where you are who you are, but you also allow the other person to be who they are because you are not constantly wanting them to be fitting into your model. This is what causes tension. Normally we think, I have this relative and he or she, we see things differently, and that causes stress. If you truly let them have their point of view, you can be comfortable with your point of view, let them have their point of view, already half the stress is gone. Okay. So to do that requires letting go. Because I notice some people, they don't even want the other person to speak because just by them saying their opinion, this causes stress. Well, this suggests that you need to look within and say, why am I so stressed out if they even speak their opinion? Let them speak their opinion. Give them space. That shows that you have enough internal clarity of your own that you are willing to let that happen. So again, this is letting go-ness of different kinds. Letting go of any kind of expectation and letting go of that things will go a certain way in a relationship. We let it develop in its own way. And so personal relationships actually thrive. And surprisingly, you might find some relationships which have been very challenging for maybe a long period of time. When you are in this open attitude of letting go and being very flexible, suddenly those people, there is the tension dissipates. Tension dissipates and you wonder, why was I all worked up about this? And mostly projecting a lot of things based on fear. Oh, this person must be like this. Half of those things probably are not even really true. But they come from that place of not wanting to let go. Okay. So when the energy starts flowing in your relationships, how does it flow? It flows because you get out of the way. How do you get out of the way? By letting go. So then the relationship flows and flourishes because the energy flows and flourishes. And like I started saying when I responded to this question, this will positively impact all your relationships. That is like a huge bonus. So actually when you go through a startup experience, even if it is like 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it will leave you a different person if you go with it with a good attitude. And that outcome is way better and more important than your product, succeeding. Although obviously hopefully that also happens. But this is something you're going to take with the rest of your life.
I think now I understand one of the statements you made at the start of our conversation, that it is not about changing your dress or going to the mountains. That's probably forcefully letting go and then trying to isolate yourself, but rather while being there, how do you manage these? Exactly. That probably segues into your book. Is this about just being? And then can you share something about what is to just be?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So my book the full title of my book is Just Be, and the subtitle is Transform Your Life and Live as Infinity. So you can see a little bit, in fact, my goal when I started writing the book was, if somebody just sees the title and that's all, they just see it on a bookshelf and title, my intention is it has a huge impact on your life, because it is a distillation of everything that I have learned along the way. That I also feel ultimately some of our great wisdom traditions have been pointing at in so many ways. It is so easy to get distracted with some of the cultural factors, social factors, external factors which come with all these different traditions, that sometimes it's hard to tell what is that core truth. And for me, the core truth, you could distill it down to just be. Because let's explore that a little bit. And given we have limited time, I'll just touch on couple of key points. And feel free to, if you're going to interrupt me if you want me to elaborate on something. Usually we are thinking, I want to be such and such. I want to be a successful doctor. I want to be a successful lawyer, whatever that may be, or an athlete, or whatever, or I want to be a good parent. These are all pointing at wonderful things, but they are ultimately certain roles we can play. We can play them well, and that's excellent. As we go through our life journey, no matter what passion you have, you start seeing that ultimately it is not about being this or being that. It is not about doing this or doing that. But it is the core of your presence, who you really, really are. And knowing that and realizing that allows you to significantly impact all the other things you do, all the roles you play. What happens, unfortunately, is we get caught up in our roles to such an extent that we lose track of who we really are. And then we find out that, oh, I became so successful, but why do I still feel incomplete, unfulfilled, unsatisfied? I have so many things, but I'm just not happy, if I'm honest. That's what a lot of people feel. Or there's so many variations of that. So all of these are pointing at one thing, is that first you have to discover the most important truth of your own being. And when you do that, it is not an intellectual pursuit by any means. It's a purely internal, direct perception of truth, of who you are, which turns out your essence is far beyond what you might normally consider your personhood, your personality, your name, and so on. That is just some of the more transient, superficial aspects of your being. But if you notice, that keeps me engaged. Even spiritual aspirants might say, oh, I know that I am not my body. Oh, I know that I am not this. But what is going on in your consciousness, if you see, sometimes it is preoccupation with these very things, okay, which you say you are not. So there is obviously some contradiction there. So when you actually see who you are, it is absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing, because you start glimpsing that you are an infinite being who is walking around in what looks like a very finite package. But your essence is not that finite package. It is absolutely incredible. So this discovery and realization, when you live it, how do you live? I would say you just be, because you do not have to go about trying to play any particular role. Now, just to be clear, just be doesn't mean you don't do anything. Just be doesn't mean you do anything you want. We're not talking about that.
That's very important.
Yeah. So, or it does mean you're sleeping all day, because just be, there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
So, just be, when you truly embody that state, you live your life from a place of, I would say, your infinite nature is guiding your movement through life. And you notice I said movement through life, not sleeping through life. So that movement through life will involve family, friends, work, everything is there. There is movement. But instead of me, the little Suresh trying to move through life, it becomes this infinite being who looks and sounds like Suresh moving through life, or whoever, right? In fact, it is absolutely the calling and ultimate direction we are all going in, whether we may realize it or not. Its life is taking us there. So this just be, the book takes you through the entire process. So it is talks about what is the state and how is it different than what we usually think of, and then how do I. Then we look at life and we feel, oh, I love this idea of being, but let me tell you, I have a difficult project ahead. I have presentations due. I have to complete the budget, and I have to take care of my family, and there's a wedding coming up. And this is, if I didn't have that, I would be happy to sign up for your retreat and just be all the time. I love it. So how do you take all these aspects of life and actually not just deal with them, but you actually leverage them for moving truly towards just be, truly towards understanding who you are? Because we may have this concept that, oh, it is just always running off to the mountains and meditating. Is that what you're saying? No, absolutely not. That is not the exclusive way to discover your true being. In fact, sitting in the traffic, you could be discovering the truth of your being. On the family dinner table, you could be discovering the truth of your being. And really, in the middle of a corporate board meeting, you could be discovering the truth of your being. So don't think it is all about sitting quietly and the eyes closed. Although, of course, that is a absolutely wonderful practice. But that's not the only thing. So in part one of the book, I talk about life and how life situations and life challenges, we can take them and use them to transform us to higher states of consciousness. In part 2 of the book, there are 3 parts. Part 2, I give specific practices which you can regularly engage in. So there are so many things out there in terms of cultivating awareness and elevating consciousness. So I've taken what I feel is the 4 most critical pieces and very simple practices that combined together, if you do daily, that tremendously accelerates the rate at which your consciousness expands. So that is a concrete practice that one could do daily. And then part 3 is what I call the living as infinity part. So you say, well, now I have really expanded and discovered my true nature. How do I truly live from this place? What do relationships look like? What do emotions look like? What do all these things look like? And how can I contribute maximally to the collective at large, rather than up until now it was me and my growth. And I feel this is such a lofty state we are looking for, the state of, whether you call it enlightenment, liberation, realization. If I just get there, oh, that is more than enough. Well, it's great, but it's not enough. And reason is, you want to get to a point where you are actually actively living that and actively sharing. So these lofty states that we might call enlightenment, realization, liberation are incredible, but not enough. Because having tasted and achieved those states, it is important to live them and share them, embody them, radiate them. And that aspect is what I call living as infinity. Because you're no longer living as a small being, you're living as infinity. But it's important to live that. It's not enough to have just tasted it. So you really get established in it and share it. And this is an important part of also helping the collective in the transformation of consciousness on a very large scale. So while living it, you are automatically helping. And when I want to clarify, living it does not just mean giving public talks and having the appearance of a teacher. It can look very ordinary. You can continue, for example, you could be a software engineer, and embody infinity as a software engineer, or embody infinity as an airline pilot, or embody infinity as a grandmother. Perfectly fine. There's nothing I'm trying to suggest that sharing this implies being some sort of global teacher or something like that. This is simply living and sharing in whatever context you find yourself in. But this way, we are demonstrating in a very fundamental way, just by our existence, that this is possible. And this is something everybody else will see and say, okay, now I understand why this is so good. I would like that kind of thing, rather than just being good this or good that. So that's a quick summary of the book. And I do want to just mention a comment I got from one reader, and this person, she called the book as a lifetime companion. Meaning, this is not a book that you quickly read in a few hours and put it away in some corner. This is the kind of book you read over a period of time, and you really let it affect your consciousness. Because part of the reason for why I am excited about this book, Justly, is it is actually more than a book. It is actually a vibrational tool which can actively help you transform your consciousness. It is an active participant in your transformation, if you wish it, of course.
Okay. This is the second time you answered a question that I had. The way you described it, at least the 3 parts of the book, and then once you have the practices, the thought in my mind was that unless I practice enough, or at least start practicing, I can't probably get into part 3. So 2 questions from that. Is that, how would you recommend this book be used? Like you said, it's probably not something that you finish over a weekend or in one sitting. How would one pace it?
Okay.
And then I'll ask the second question.
So generally, I would say start reading the book sequentially, because it is designed to be read that way. It builds up that way. So that is part one, is where we are dealing with life challenges. So that's a good place to connect. And so that's a good place to start. Now, so simple rule is read it sequentially. Now, having said that, I'm going to contradict myself a little bit, because you might see a chapter which is down the road. You see chapter 10, and that looks very, very interesting for some reason. And it is in part 3, and you feel, oh my God, this is part of living as infinity. I would say feel free to jump there, and you can find some, if you're drawn to it, you will find something there that is very fascinating, which you can use right away. So have the general rule of sequential, but feel free to break the rule as often as you like. Okay. Yeah. And did you have one more question, piece?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because some of these seem to be very practical, I can do, which means that it is a 101 level. I can be a novice, I can be just curious, I can be something. Whereas this living infinity kind of bothers me a little bit, that should I be at a certain level of practice or something? Is it a 401 level book?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the paradox with just be is, first of all, you do not have to do something first before you are eligible and qualified and competent enough to just be. Just be is intrinsic to every one of us from the moment you have been there. So you can go to the state of just be right now. And I would encourage you to do that and not think that I have to complete this book or complete this practice or do anything else. You can just right now, you're ready for this. Okay, right now. So the just be state is a very advanced state. At the same time, it is a very, very accessible state to anybody. If you're breathing, you are right there. You are just so close to it. So you can go there anytime. Now, I also give lots of practices in the book, because we're used to somewhat thinking we need to do something. And why not do something that will make the access more crisp? So there are certainly doings that you can explore. But don't feel like these doings are something without which you can't go there. They are going to smoothen, and it's like putting grease so that you can go more smoothly and easily. But it is not fundamentally saying that until that you cannot go. Because the most important requirement you have already satisfied. Your essence is there right now. That's all that's needed. You can go there.
Okay, that's definitely reassuring, and then definitely not scary.
Good.
Yeah, to read the book.
Good.
Yeah. One thought that crossed my mind as well, just to close. Recently, I heard someone saying that we all have aspirations, and we all want to be identifying some role models, saying that let us be a hero, let us be a champion, let us be this successful person in life and all that. And what this person was saying, that is all wrong way of doing things. It's aim to be an amateur. Have fun. Amateurs do it because they love it. And definitely after this conversation, and the initial apprehensions I had about the book or about this jump into the unknown or the uncertainty and all that, I think I'll enjoy it.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Excellent.
So, thanks Suresh for the time. I'm sure there would be questions from our listeners. When we get those questions, we'll pass them on to you.
Yeah, it's been a delight. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast, and I'm thrilled we were able to cover so many things. Excellent questions, and I definitely look forward to future conversations.
Thanks.
If you like the show and would like to share your experiences with the community, or know someone else who might want to do that, please get in touch with us at podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com. That is podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com.